Are you tired of hearing that climate change is an impossible problem? That the numbers are too big? The system's too broken? The timeline too short? Here's something the doom and gloom headlines miss. We already know how to solve this, and in some places it's already working. But first, we need to understand what we're actually up against. A striking paradox sits at the heart of the climate crisis. The people who've done the least to cause climate change are suffering the most from its impacts. And what if solving that injustice could help solve the climate crisis itself? This is one of the most striking tensions of our time. And today we're going to explore not just why it exists, but what peer-reviewed research tells us is actually working to fix it. The Doughnut Economics framework helps us see this tension with clarity. The inner ring represents the social foundation, the basic needs that no one should fall below. Energy is one of them. The outer ring represents the ecological ceiling, the planetary boundaries we cannot cross. Between these rings lies the safe and just space where humanity can thrive. The problem? Today's energy systems violate both boundaries simultaneously. They leave billions in energy poverty while pumping greenhouse gases that destabilize the climate. Those same billions will suffer from most acutely. Here's what the data reveals. 750 million people lack electricity access. 2.1 billion lack clean cooking fuels. These same communities contribute almost nothing to climate change. An average American generates in 2 days what a person in Mali or Niger produces in an entire year. And yet, the IPCC's sixth assessment report found mortality from storms, floods, and droughts was 15 times higher in these highly vulnerable communities between 2010 and 2020. The people who caused the least suffer the most. This pattern didn't emerge by accident. Colonial powers built energy infrastructure for extraction and export, not domestic development. Mines, plantations, and ports got electricity. Villages did not. Sub-Saharan Africa contributes roughly 4% of global carbon dioxide emissions, while housing, 80% of the world's population that still lacks access to electricity. Today's financial architecture honestly just perpetuates these patterns. 85% of clean energy investment flows to advanced economies and China. Africa, home to 20% of humanity, receives just 2%. The cost of capital for clean energy projects is at least twice as high in developing countries compared to advanced economies, reflecting perceived risks that themselves stem from, historical underinvestment. Energy poverty doesn't just leave people in the dark, it actively undermines climate resilience. Without electricity, households can't power air conditioning during lethal heat waves, charge phones for early warning systems, or refrigerate medications and food. The Sustainable Energy for All initiative estimates that 1.2 billion people face extreme and potentially fatal risk from heat, specifically because they lack access to cooling. The 2025 Multidimensional Poverty Index found that nearly 80% of the world's poorest people live in regions simultaneously affected by one or more climate hazards. Geography has become destiny, but as we'll see, geography isn't fate. The cooking fuel crisis illustrates the doughnut's tension between social foundation and planetary boundaries with painful clarity. 2.1 billion people relying on biomass fuels for cooking face a daily impossible choice. Indoor cooking with solid fuels generates particulate matter levels up to 1,000 milligrams per cubic meter, far exceeding WHO guidelines. This causes 2.9 million premature deaths annually. Women and children bear 2/3 of this health burden. Women spend an average of 4 hours daily cooking and 20 hours weekly collecting firewood, time that could otherwise generate income or education. WHO data shows that 44% of all pneumonia deaths in children under 5 stem from household air pollution. But here's what changes our understanding. Clean cooking solutions could save 1.5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent by 2030, 900 million tons from sub-Saharan Africa alone. Addressing the social foundation shortfall and staying within the ecological ceiling aren't competing goals. They're the same goal, approached from different angles. This is what a thriving future looks like. Solutions that serve both rings of the doughnut simultaneously. India's Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana program reached over 103 million beneficiaries, the world's largest clean cooking initiative. Peer-reviewed research found that 55% of surveyed LPG users reported fewer respiratory illnesses after gaining access. Yet fuel stacking persists as families cannot afford consistent refills. The lesson: connections matter, but quality and affordability require ongoing attention. This crisis doesn't respect national borders, a reminder that the social foundation applies everywhere, not just in the global south. In the United States, 2,300 people died from heat-related causes in 2023, the highest figure in 45 years of CDC records. Nearly 75% occurred in 5 southern states. In Phoenix's Maricopa County alone, 579 confirmed heat deaths. And here's what really demands our attention. 109 of 146 indoor deaths involved air conditioning that was present but not functioning, often because families couldn't afford to run it. Racial and income disparities shape vulnerability even in wealthy nations. Black households in the United States face energy burdens 43% higher than white households. Native American households face burdens 45% higher. Historically redlined neighborhoods are 4.6 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than non-redlined areas, a legacy of discriminatory policy written into the physical landscape. Across the Atlantic, the United Kingdom saw 3.17 million households in fuel poverty as of 2024, with over a third of all households spending more than 10% of income on energy following the 2022 crisis. Cold homes cause an estimated 7,400 deaths annually in the UK alone. Across the European Union, 40 million people couldn't adequately heat their homes during the energy crisis. But, programs really demonstrate that solutions exist at every income level. The U.S. Weatherization Assistance Program has helped about 7.2 million families since 1976, saving an average of $372 annually per household, while also leveraging $3.48 in outside funding for every federal dollar invested. The question isn't whether solutions work, it's scale. The numbers reveal a financial architecture that, honestly, perpetuates inequality, not through malice, but through inertia and misaligned incentives. Global fossil fuel subsidies reached $7 trillion in 2022, a record high representing about 7.1% of global GDP. That same year, international public adaptation finance to developing countries totaled just $26 billion, down from the previous year. The ratio is staggering: $270, propping up the problem for every dollar spent helping communities adapt to its consequences. Climate finance promises have been systematically under-delivered. The $100 billion annual commitment made at Copenhagen in 2009 wasn't met until 2022, 2 years late. The United States provided only 5% of its fair share in 2020, contributing $2 billion when its proportional responsibility would have been $43 billion. Debt burdens compound the challenge. Least developed countries and small island developing states spend twice as much servicing debts as they receive in climate finance. Over 80% of climate disasters worsen government debt within 2 years, creating a reinforcing cycle where the impacts of climate change further reduce capacity to adapt. The International Energy Agency projects that 660 million people will remain without electricity by 2030 under current trajectories. But here's what those projections miss: investment patterns can shift. They have before, and they're shifting now in places that decided to make different choices. Against this backdrop, breakthrough successes demonstrate what's possible when political will meets smart policy design. These aren't pilot projects or promising experiments, they're transformations at national scale. India's Saubhagya scheme electrified 28.6 million households between 2017 and 2022, lifting national electricity access from 80% in 2000 to 99.6%. Rural power availability more than doubled, from 12.5 kilowatt-hours in 2015 to 29.5 in 2024. Quality gaps remain significant. 18% of the poorest rural households still lack reliable power despite having connections. And, average electrified households receive only 12.5 hours of supply daily. Yet, the infrastructure now exists for continuous improvement. Progress isn't perfection, but it's progress. Kenya's off-grid solar revolution offers perhaps the most replicable model. Electricity access surged from 37% in 2013 to 79% in 2023. Off-grid solar accounted for 75% of rural connections. The last-mile connectivity project brought power to 9 million people since 2015. M-Copa's pay-as-you-go model really transformed access. Peer-reviewed studies of over 2,300 households found that 94% reported improved quality of life. 60% undertook more work within 3 months. Median incomes in connected communities, well, they quadrupled. Bangladesh's solar home system program installed 4.1 million systems, reaching 20 million people, the world's largest off-grid solar initiative. Households gained $745 million in financial benefits. The government gained $474 million through taxes and avoided kerosene subsidies. The program reduced emissions by 9.6 million tons of CO2 equivalent and avoided consumption of 4.4 billion liters of kerosene. Success factors included leveraging existing microfinance infrastructure, offering payment plans that matched kerosene costs, and building local manufacturing capacity with women-led technology centers. These aren't exceptions, they're proof of concept at scale. Beyond access, the question of who controls and benefits from energy systems is, reshaping what a thriving energy future looks like. Indigenous-led renewable projects are really proliferating across North America, with 194 documented projects in Canada alone. The Moapa Band of Paiutes operates a 250-megawatt solar farm in Nevada, the first utility-scale solar installation on tribal lands, generating lease revenue and creating 115 jobs for tribal members. Just transition frameworks are proving that decarbonization doesn't have to mean hardship for fossil fuel-dependent communities. Collie, Western Australia, a coal town, has attracted nearly $700 million Australian dollars in investment to retrain and repurpose its workforce. Since 2019, the labor force is up 5.4%, population up 4%, building approvals increased fivefold, and median house prices are up 21%. New financing mechanisms are beginning to break the debt climate trap. Ecuador completed the largest debt for climate swap in history in 2023, converting $1.6 billion in commercial debt while funding 60,000 square kilometers of marine protection. When communities own the transition, they build political support that sustains it. Several patterns emerge from this analysis, patterns that distinguish successful interventions from well-intentioned failures. Energy poverty and climate vulnerability are not separate problems requiring separate solutions. They are interlinked expressions of the same systemic gaps. Programs that address one while ignoring the other will ultimately fall short. The financing gap reflects misallocation, not scarcity. The $7 trillion in annual fossil fuel subsidies dwarfs not only climate adaptation finance, but the entire cost of achieving universal clean energy access. Redirecting even a fraction would transform possibilities. Community ownership and just transition frameworks address the political economy that has historically blocked change. When coal communities see viable alternatives rather than abandonment, resistance gives way to participation. When indigenous nations control renewable projects, benefits stay local and political support broadens. And the tension the Doughnut framework highlights is resolvable, but only through clean energy pathways. Extending fossil fuel access to the energy poor would briefly address the social foundation shortfall while breaching planetary boundaries. Clean energy access addresses both simultaneously. This is the path to a thriving future. The solutions exist and are scaling. India proved that hundreds of millions can gain electricity access in under a decade. Kenya demonstrated that off-grid solar can achieve rural electrification rates comparable to decades of grid extension. Bangladesh showed that solar home systems can reach millions while avoiding billions of liters of kerosene. What's needed now is the political will to redirect resources at the scale the moment demands. That means fossil fuel subsidy reform channeling trillions toward clean energy access, debt relief for climate-vulnerable nations, climate finance that arrives as grants rather than loans. The energy divide is not inevitable. It is the product of choices, and different choices can close it. The communities caught between energy poverty and climate vulnerability deserve nothing less than the full resources of human ingenuity and solidarity. Meeting their needs while respecting planetary boundaries isn't just possible. It's the definition of a thriving future within the doughnut. And in India, Kenya, Bangladesh, and communities around the world, that future is already taking shape.